Welcome back. Tonight, we're heading to the dark waters surrounding Japan, where something ancient and deeply unsettling has been happening for generations. These aren't just stories whispered by superstitious fishermen or tales told to scare tourists. These are accounts from ferry workers, late-night passengers, and Coast Guard officials who've experienced things on the water that they can't explain. Japan is an island nation made up of over 6,800 islands connected by an intricate network of ferry routes. Every single day, thousands of people board these ferries to travel between the mainland and remote islands, between prefectures, across narrow straits and vast bays. Most trips are uneventful, just another commute, another journey home. But there's something different about the last ferry, you know the one I'm talking about, the final departure of the night. The one that leaves the dock around midnight or later, when the sky is pitch black and the water looks like liquid ink. When most passengers are either drunk salarymen heading home after missing the last train or locals who have no other choice, when the crew is exhausted, ready for their shift to end. That's when things happen. In Japanese folklore, there's a concept called funayure, the vengeful spirits of people who died at sea. According to legend, these spirits appear on boats, trying to capsize them or drag the living into the water to join them. They're said to approach vessels at night, asking to borrow a hishaku, a bamboo ladle, which they then use to fill the boat with water until it sinks. But here's the thing, these aren't just old legends anymore. Ferry workers across Japan have reported eerily similar experiences on late-night routes. Passengers who board but never disembark. Faces in the water, keeping pace with the ship. Crew members who died years ago but are still seen walking the decks. Cold spots in certain cabins that never warm up, no matter the season. And the most disturbing pattern? Most of these encounters happen on ferries traveling over water where people have drowned, whether from shipwrecks, suicides, or accidents. Japan has a complicated relationship with its waters. The sea provides food, trade, and transportation, but it also takes typhoons, tsunamis, ferry disasters like the Toyomaru incident in 1954, which killed over 1,000 people. The sea remembers every life it's claimed, and on certain nights, at certain times, those memories surface. Over the next 4 stories, I'm going to share documented accounts from different ferry routes across Japan. These are based on real testimonies from ferry workers, passengers, and Coast Guard reports. Some details have been changed to protect people's privacy, but the core events, those happened exactly as I'm about to describe them. So before you board that last ferry after midnight, before you accept that cheap ticket on a route that should be more expensive, before you ignore that feeling in your gut that tells you to wait for morning, remember these stories. Because once you're out on the open water in the middle of the night, there's nowhere to run, no way to get off. You're trapped on that boat until it reaches the other side. If it reaches the other side. Let's dive in. Chapter 2. The Tsugaru Strait Ferry, 2017. The Tsugaru Strait is one of the most important waterways in Japan, connecting the main island of Honshu to Hokkaido. It's cold, deep, and notoriously dangerous. Strong currents, unpredictable weather, and a dark history of maritime disasters. Even today, with modern navigation equipment, captains treat this strait with respect. In October 2017, a ferry worker named Takeshi Yamamoto was assigned to the 1 a.m. departure from Aomori to Hakodate. He'd worked this route for almost 8 years, and the overnight shift was nothing new to him. Most nights were quiet, just a handful of passengers, mostly sleeping, and a routine crossing that took about 4 hours. But this particular night felt different from the moment he boarded. The weather was calm, which was unusual for October in the Tsugaru Strait. The water was eerily still, like glass. No wind, no waves, just an unnatural flatness that made the entire sea look dead. Takeshi mentioned it to the captain, who shrugged and said, "Better than a storm." They departed on schedule. Only about 20 passengers were on board, a few salarymen who'd missed the last train, a couple of tourists, and several elderly locals. Takeshi did his usual rounds, checking tickets and making sure everyone was settled in the passenger cabin. Around 2:30 a.m., about halfway through the crossing, Takeshi stepped out onto the exterior deck to get some air. It was freezing cold, and his breath came out in thick clouds. The ferry's lights illuminated maybe 20 meters of water on either side, but beyond that was just infinite blackness. That's when he saw her, a woman in the water, floating on her back, arms spread out like she was making a snow angel. She was wearing what looked like a white dress that billowed around her in the water. Her long black hair fanned out around her head, and she was keeping perfect pace with the ferry, not swimming, not struggling, just floating alongside the ship as it moved through the water. Takeshi's first instinct was to grab the emergency phone and report a person overboard, but something stopped him. The woman's eyes. They were open, staring straight up at the sky. And even from the deck, even in the darkness, he could see they were completely white. No pupils, no iris, just white. Then she turned her head and looked directly at him. Takeshi stumbled backward, his heart hammering. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. She was still there, still staring, still keeping pace with the ferry, which was moving at about 20 knots. He ran back inside, found another crew member, and dragged him out to the deck. "There's someone in the water," he shouted. "Right there, look!" The other crew member looked where Takeshi was pointing. The water was empty, just dark, still water reflecting the ferry's lights. "There's nothing there, man," the crew member said, concerned. "You feeling okay?" Takeshi insisted he'd seen a woman in the water. The crew member radioed the captain anyway, and they did a standard check, scanning the water with spotlights, checking the radar. Nothing. The captain chalked it up to exhaustion and told Takeshi to take a break. But Takeshi couldn't shake what he'd seen. He went back inside the passenger cabin, and that's when things got worse. He was walking past the rows of seats when he noticed something strange. Wet footprints on the floor. They led from the exterior door, the one he'd just come through, all the way down the center aisle. Each footprint was small, delicate, unmistakably a woman's bare foot. And they were soaking wet, leaving puddles on the industrial carpet. Takeshi followed the footprints with his eyes. They led to a seat in the back row where a woman was sitting alone, her head bowed, long black hair covering her face. She was wearing a white dress that was dripping wet, creating a pool of water around her feet. "Excuse me, miss?" Takeshi approached carefully. "Are you all right? Do you need a blanket or—" The woman slowly raised her head. It was her, the same woman from the water. Up close, Takeshi could see her skin was grey, almost blue. Her white eyes stared at him without blinking. Her lips were purple, and when she opened her mouth, seawater poured out, splashing onto her lap. Takeshi screamed and ran. He found the captain, gasping, barely able to form words. "She's on the ship. The woman from the water. She's inside. She's—" They rushed back to the passenger cabin. The captain turned on all the lights, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent brightness. The back row was empty. The seat where the woman had been sitting was completely dry. No wet footprints, no puddles, nothing. But Takeshi noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the seat pocket of the chair where the woman had been sitting, there was a ferry ticket. The paper was waterlogged, barely readable. The captain picked it up carefully, squinting at the faded printing. The date on the ticket was the 26th of September, 1954. That was the date of the Toyomaru disaster, the deadliest ferry accident in Japanese history. The Toyomaru was caught in a typhoon in the Tsugaru Strait. It sank within hours, and 1,153 people died. Most of the bodies were never recovered. The captain's face went white. He'd been sailing this strait for 30 years, and he knew the stories. Every ferry worker on this route knew. The Tsugaru Strait is a graveyard. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people have died in these waters over the decades, and according to local superstition, on certain nights, especially calm, unnaturally still nights, they come back. They surface near passing ferries. They watch. They wait. And sometimes, they board. The captain ordered the crew not to mention what happened to the passengers. They finished the crossing without incident, docking in Hakodate at 4:47 a.m. But Takeshi never worked the overnight shift again. He requested a transfer to daytime routes, and when asked why, he simply said, "I'm not comfortable with the late-night passengers anymore." Other ferry workers on the Tsugaru Strait route have reported similar encounters. A survey conducted quietly among crew members in 2018 revealed that over 40% had experienced something they couldn't explain on overnight crossings: figures in the water, wet footprints with no source, passengers who vanish, and always that eerie stillness on the water before something appears. The ferry company doesn't talk about it publicly, bad for business. But among the workers, there's an unspoken rule. If you see someone in the water on the overnight crossing, don't report it. And if they board the ferry, don't engage with them, just let them ride. Because the drowned don't need your help, they're already exactly where they want to be. Chapter 3. The Seto Inland Sea Ferry, 2019. The Seto Inland Sea is one of Japan's most beautiful waterways, dotted with hundreds of small islands and connected by countless ferry routes. During the day, it's picturesque, sparkling blue water, green islands, white ferries gliding peacefully between ports. It's a major tourist destination. But at night, especially on the smaller island routes, it's a different story. In May 2019, a university student named Kenji Matsuda was traveling from Takamatsu to Naoshima, a small art island in Kagawa Prefecture. He'd spent the day in Takamatsu and missed the last scheduled ferry, so he ended up booking a spot on a small private ferry service that made late-night runs for islanders. The ferry was tiny, maybe capacity for 30 people, but that night there were only about 8 passengers total, just locals heading home after work or visiting family. The ferry was scheduled to depart at 11:45 p.m. Kenji boarded and found a seat in the small indoor cabin. The other passengers were scattered around, an elderly couple, a middle-aged man in a business suit, a woman with shopping bags, and a few others. Everyone looked tired, minding their own business. The ferry departed on time, and the captain announced it would be a 40-minute crossing. Kenji pulled out his phone to pass the time, but noticed there was no signal once they got away from shore. So he just sat back and watched the dark water through the windows. About 20 minutes into the crossing, Kenji noticed something odd. When he'd boarded, he'd counted 8 passengers including himself. But now, glancing around the cabin, he counted 9. There was a young man sitting in the corner who definitely hadn't been there before. He was wearing old-fashioned clothing, the kind you'd see in photos from the 1980 seconds. A faded denim jacket, high-waisted jeans, and a shirt with a geometric pattern. His hair was styled in an outdated cut, and he was soaking wet. Water was dripping from his hair, running down his face, puddling on the floor around his feet. His clothes clung to his body, completely drenched, as if he'd just climbed out of the sea. Kenji looked around to see if anyone else was noticing this, but all the other passengers were either sleeping or staring at their phones. The young man in the corner sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead with empty, unfocused eyes. Kenji felt his pulse quicken. Where had this person come from? They were in the middle of the sea. There was nowhere he could have boarded from. And why was he so wet? "Excuse me," Kenji said quietly, leaning toward the man. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The young man didn't respond, didn't even blink, just kept staring straight ahead. Kenji stood up and approached him. "Hey, are you—" The moment Kenji got within a few feet, the temperature dropped dramatically. His breath became visible in the air. The hair on his arm stood up. And he smelled it. That overwhelming scent of salt water and decay, like a beach at low tide mixed with something rotting. The young man's head slowly turned toward Kenji. His eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye, like they'd been filled with ink. His mouth opened, and a stream of seawater poured out, splashing onto the floor. Kenji backed away, his heart pounding. He bumped into the elderly woman behind him, who woke up startled. "What's wrong?" she asked. Kenji pointed at the corner. "That man, The corner was empty. The seat where the young man had been sitting was completely dry. No water on the floor, no wet footprints, just an empty seat. The elderly woman looked at Kenji with concern. "Are you feeling all right, young man? Maybe you should sit down." Kenji sat down, shaking. He told himself he'd been half asleep, that his eyes had played tricks on him. But deep down, he knew what he'd seen was real. The ferry arrived at Naoshima without further incident. As Kenji was disembarking, the captain, a weathered man in his 60s, stopped him. "You saw him, didn't you?" the captain said quietly. Kenji froze. "Saw who?" "The passenger in the corner. The wet one." Kenji's mouth went dry. You've seen him too?" The captain nodded grimly. "A lot of us have. He's been riding this ferry for about 30 years now. Always on the late-night crossings. Always sits in that same corner. Always soaking wet." "Who is he?" Kenji asked. The captain sighed. "In 1989, a young man, about 23 years old, took this exact ferry route late at night. According to witnesses, he seemed upset, disturbed about something. Halfway through the crossing, he got up, walked out to the exterior deck, and jumped overboard." By the time the crew realized what happened and turned the ferry around, he was gone. They searched for hours but never found his body. The currents in the Seto Inland Sea are tricky, could have taken him anywhere. So that was his ghost? Kenji whispered. We don't like to use that word, the captain said. But, yes, probably. He's been seen dozens of times over the years, always on the late-night ferry. Always in that corner. Some people think he doesn't know he's dead, that he's just still trying to get home. The captain patted Kenji on the shoulder. My advice? If you ever take this ferry again late at night and you see him, just leave him alone. Don't talk to him. Don't approach him. He's not dangerous. He's just there, stuck, riding this route forever. Kenji never took that ferry route again, especially not at night. But he did some research afterward and found out the captain's story checked out. In August 1989, a 23-year-old man named Hiroshi Tanaka did indeed jump from a late-night ferry in the Seto Inland Sea and drowned. His body was never recovered, and according to local residents on Naoshima, he's still riding that ferry, still trying to complete his journey home. Because sometimes the dead don't realize they never made it to their destination. They just keep riding night after night, waiting for a stop that will never come. Chapter 4, The Oki Islands Ferry, 2020. The Oki Islands are a remote archipelago in the Sea of Japan, about 50 kilometers off the coast of Shimane Prefecture. Getting there requires a ferry ride that can take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours depending on weather and which island you're heading to. It's beautiful but isolated, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and tourists are rare outside of summer months. In December 2020, during the height of Japan's COVID-19 restrictions, a ferry worker named Yuki Kobayashi was assigned to the overnight cargo ferry that transported supplies to the islands. Unlike the passenger ferries, this one ran year-round, regardless of weather, because the islands depended on it for essential goods. The departure was scheduled for 1:30 a.m. from Sakai Minato port. It was just Yuki, the captain, and one other crew member, a skeleton crew for a routine cargo run. No passengers were booked, which was normal for this particular ferry in winter. The weather was terrible. A winter storm was approaching, bringing heavy winds and rough seas. The captain considered cancelling, but the islands had been waiting for supplies for 3 days already due to the previous storm. They decided to risk it. They loaded the cargo and departed into the black, churning sea. The ferry rocked violently from side to side. Waves crashed over the bow. It was miserable, but nothing the experienced crew couldn't handle. About 45 minutes into the crossing, Yuki went below deck to check on the cargo straps and make sure nothing had shifted in the rough seas. The cargo hold was dark except for the emergency lighting, and the sound of the storm was muffled down here, replaced by the constant groan and creak of the ship's hull. As Yuki was inspecting a pallet of supplies, he heard footsteps behind him. Heavy boots on the metal floor. He turned around and saw a man standing near the stairs. He was wearing a crew uniform, the old style that the ferry company had used about 15 years ago before they updated their uniforms. He was middle-aged, stocky, with a thick beard, and he was staring at Yuki with an intense, unwavering gaze. "Hey," Yuki called out. "Did the captain send you down? I thought it was just us three tonight." The man didn't respond. He just stood there, staring. "Who are you?" Yuki asked, walking toward him. "Are you part of the crew?" The man suddenly turned and walked up the stairs, disappearing into the darkness above. Yuki followed quickly, confused and a little unnerved. He climbed the stairs and emerged back on the main deck, where the storm immediately hit him. Wind, rain, the spray of seawater. The bearded man was walking toward the bridge. Yuki chased after him. "Hey, wait!" But when Yuki reached the bridge and burst inside, there was no one there except the captain and the other crew member, both focused on navigating through the storm. "Did someone just come in here?" Yuki asked, breathless. The captain glanced at him. "What? No, it's just been us. I just saw a man in an old crew uniform. He came up from the cargo hold and walked toward the bridge. Bearded guy, stocky." The captain and the other crew member exchanged a long look, the kind of look that made Yuki's stomach sink. "Yuki," the captain said slowly, "there's no one else on this ship. Just the three of us." "But I saw him," Yuki insisted. "He was right there." The captain sighed and gestured for Yuki to come closer. He pulled out his phone and showed him a photo. Did he look like this? It was a crew photo from about 15 years ago. And there, in the back row, was the bearded man Yuki had just seen. Exactly the same face, exactly the same build. "Who is that?" Yuki whispered. "His name was Tetsuya Nakamura," the captain said quietly. "He worked this exact route for over 20 years. One night in 2009, during a storm just like this one, he went out on deck to secure some cargo that had come loose. A rogue wave hit the ferry and swept him overboard. We couldn't turn around fast enough in those conditions. By the time we circled back, he was gone. Never found his body." Yuki felt his skin crawl. "So I just saw his ghost," the other crew member finished. "We've all seen him, Yuki. Everyone who's worked this overnight route has seen Tetsuya at least once. He shows up during storms, usually when the crossing is dangerous. Some people think he's still trying to do his job, checking the cargo, making sure the ship is safe." "Why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Yuki demanded. "Because people don't believe it until they see it themselves," the captain said. "And we don't like to scare new crew members. But now that you've seen him, you should know. If you see Tetsuya again, don't be afraid. He's not here to hurt anyone. He's just still working. Still doing what he loved." The ferry reached the Oki Island safely and the crew unloaded the cargo without incident. But Yuki couldn't shake the image of Tetsuya standing in the cargo hold, staring at him with those intense eyes. Over the following months, Yuki worked many more overnight cargo runs, and 3 more times during particularly rough weather, he saw Tetsuya. Once walking the perimeter of the deck, checking equipment, once standing at the bow, looking out at the storm, and once in the engine room, as if inspecting the machinery. Each time, Tetsuya would make eye contact with Yuki, give a slight nod as if to say everything's fine, and then vanish. Yuki eventually came to see Tetsuya not as something frightening, but as a kind of guardian, a crew member who loved his job so much that not even death could make him abandon it. But here's what still disturbs Yuki to this day. Tetsuya only appears during dangerous crossings, during storms, when conditions are bad. And Yuki can't help but wonder, is Tetsuya still trying to protect the ferry, or is he trying to warn them? Because sometimes the dead who love the sea don't rest. They keep working, keep watching, keep trying to prevent others from meeting the same fate they did. Chapter 5. The Kagoshima-Yakushima Ferry, 2022. Our final story takes place on one of Japan's most remote ferry routes, from Kagoshima City to Yakushima Island. Yakushima is famous for its ancient cedar forests, dramatic mountains, and the inspiration it provided for Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke. But it's also one of the wettest places in Japan, prone to sudden storms and treacherous seas. In August 2022, a 28-year-old travel blogger named Sakura Tanaka decided to take the overnight ferry from Kagoshima to Yakushima to catch the sunrise from the island. The last ferry departed at 12:30 a.m. and tickets were cheap because most tourists preferred the daytime ferries with better views. Sakura didn't mind. She was traveling on a budget and she figured she'd just sleep during the crossing anyway. The ferry journey takes about 4 hours. When she boarded, she immediately noticed how empty it was. Maybe 10 passengers total on a ferry designed for 200, the vessel felt cavernous, hollow, with most of the seating areas completely dark to save electricity. She found a seat near a window and settled in, wrapping herself in her jacket. Most of the other passengers were already sleeping or staring blankly at their phones. The atmosphere was quiet, almost eerily so. The ferry departed on schedule, and Sakura watched the lights of Kagoshima City slowly disappear behind them, replaced by the infinite darkness of the open sea. She tried to sleep but couldn't get comfortable, so she decided to walk around the ferry to stretch her legs. As she wandered through the passenger cabin, she noticed something strange. There were more people than she'd initially thought. In the darker corners, in rows of seats further back, she could see figures sitting silently. She counted maybe 20 or 30 people now, which didn't make sense. She'd definitely seen fewer people when boarding. And something else was odd. None of them were moving. No one was checking their phone, shifting in their seat, or even breathing in a noticeable way. They just sat there, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Sakura felt a chill run down her spine. She approached one of the figures, an elderly woman in traditional Japanese clothing, sitting ramrod straight with her hands folded in her lap. "Excuse me," Sakura said softly. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't respond, didn't even blink. Sakura reached out to gently touch the woman's shoulder and her hand passed right through. The woman flickered like a projection, becoming translucent for a moment before solidifying again. Sakura gasped and stumbled backward. She looked around the cabin with new eyes, heart pounding. All those silent figures, they weren't real. They were projections. Ghosts. Dozens of them, filling the empty seats. Sakura ran to find a crew member. She found a young attendant in the hallway and grabbed his arm. "There are ghosts in the passenger cabin. I just put my hand through one of them." The attendant's face went pale. "You can see them? You know about this?" Sakura demanded. The attendant led her quickly to a small crew area and closed the door behind them. "Listen, this is going to sound insane, but yes, we know. We've always known." "What are you talking about?" The attendant took a deep breath. "This ferry route, it's cursed, has been for decades. Back in 1977, a ferry traveling from Kagoshima to Yakushima was hit by a typhoon. The ship capsized. All 73 passengers and crew members drowned. For years after that, no ferry company would run this route at night because of all the reported sightings. "But you're running it now," Sakura said. "Because people need to get to the island," the attendant explained. So in the 1990 seconds, a ferry company started running overnight routes again, but the sightings never stopped. Every single overnight ferry, without fail, picks up passengers that aren't really there. They board in Kagoshima, they sit in the cabin, and they ride all the way to Yakushima. Then they disappear when the ferry docks. "Why don't you warn people?" Sakura asked. "Most people can't see them," the attendant said. "Only certain people, we call them sensitive, can actually see the ghost passengers. For everyone else, the cabin just looks empty. That's why we keep the lights low. It's easier that way." Sakura felt sick. "So I'm riding a ferry full of ghosts?" "They won't hurt you," the attendant assured her. "They never interact with anyone. They just ride. Like they're still trying to complete their journey from 1977. Like they never realized they drowned." Sakura didn't know what to say. She went back to her seat, but now she couldn't unsee them. The cabin was packed with silent, unmoving figures. Men in 1970 seconds, business suits, women in outdated dresses. Even a few children, sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead with empty eyes. She counted 73 ghost passengers. Exactly the number who died in the 1977 disaster. The ferry journey felt eternal. Sakura couldn't sleep, couldn't relax. She just sat there, surrounded by the dead, watching as they maintained their vigil. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ferry speakers crackled to life. "We will be arriving at Yakushima port in 15 minutes. Please prepare for disembarkation." As the announcement finished, something strange happened. All 73 ghost passengers stood up simultaneously. In perfect synchronization, they walked toward the exit doors, forming orderly lines like they were preparing to leave. But when the ferry docked and the real passengers began disembarking, the ghost passengers simply faded away. One by one, they became translucent, then disappeared completely. Sakura walked off the ferry on shaking legs. The attendant gave her a sympathetic nod as she passed. She spent 3 days on Yakushima, exploring the forests and trying to forget what she'd experienced. But when it was time to leave, she couldn't bring herself to take the overnight ferry back. She waited an entire day just to catch the morning departure, despite the significantly higher ticket price. When Sakura later shared her experience on her travel blog, she received dozens of messages from other people who'd taken that same overnight ferry. Many reported similar experiences, seeing passengers who weren't there, feeling overwhelming sadness or dread, hearing whispers in empty hallways, or seeing figures standing on the exterior deck staring out at the water. The ferry company has never officially acknowledged any of this, of course. Bad for business. But among the crew members who work the overnight Kagoshima-Yakushima route, it's common knowledge they're not alone on those crossings. They never have been, because the 73 passengers and crew who drowned in 1977 are still trying to reach Yakushima, still trying to complete their journey. And every night, they board the ferry and ride through the darkness, waiting for a destination they will never reach. So, the next time you're offered a cheap ticket on a late-night ferry, the next time you're tempted to save money by taking the overnight crossing, remember these stories. Remember that the sea never forgets. The drowned never rest, and some passengers have been riding these ferries for decades, waiting for a home they'll never see again. Sleep well tonight. And if you ever find yourself on a ferry after midnight, don't look too closely at your fellow passengers, because some of them might not have a heartbeat.